They sneer and point, thinking it's just a cruel joke. She runs the little community center everyone loves, making soup, holding lost teens, and teaching kids to dream. When a threat lands on her door, the town expects fear. What they don't expect is the quiet man at her side, a reformed biker who left violence behind to build jobs, not enemies. He won't start a fight, but he won't let the people he loves be broken either. Secrets start to unravel, old grudges wake up, and the neighborhood is forced to choose. In the face of hatred, will they choose fear or the hard work of forgiveness? And what will it cost them to find out? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Willow Street Community Center, casting warm squares of light across the worn wooden floor. The golden glow highlighted decades of scuff marks and loving use, evidence of countless children's footsteps, community dances, and neighborhood gatherings. Maya Brooks moved methodically through the space, her broom making soft swishing sounds as she prepared for the center's 25th anniversary fundraiser. Her practiced movements showed the care of someone who had swept these same boards thousands of times before. She paused to adjust a crooked picture frame, a faded photograph of smiling children from the center's early days. The colors had softened over time, but the joy in those young faces remained as vibrant as ever. Running her fingers lightly over the glass, Maya smiled at the memory of those first uncertain months when the center was just a dream and a leaky roof. The familiar scent of her chicken and vegetable soup wafted from the small kitchen, where a large pot simmered steadily on the stove. Steam rose in gentle curls, carrying the aroma of carrots, celery, and her secret blend of herbs throughout the building. Maya had been making this same recipe for community gatherings for over 2 decades now, a dish that somehow managed to comfort both the youngest children and the most skeptical town council members. "Miss Maya?" June Alvarez's voice carried from the multi-purpose room, tinged with that familiar mix of eagerness and uncertainty. "Is this okay?" The teenager held up a delicate paper rose, her slender fingers carefully creasing the edges. Her dark eyes watched Maya anxiously, seeking approval. Scattered across the folding table were dozens more flowers in various stages of completion, some perfectly formed, others bearing the marks of frustrated attempts and fresh starts. Maya crossed the room, her practical shoes clicking against the floor, the sound echoing in the high-ceilinged space. "That's beautiful, honey," she said, genuine admiration warming her voice. She noticed June's dark hair falling into her eyes and automatically reached for a hair tie from her wrist. "Here, let me help you with that." Her gentle hands gathered June's hair into a neat ponytail, a familiar gesture that made June smile. The girl's shoulders relaxed visibly under Maya's touch, as they always did. "Aye, Maya," Tia's voice boomed from the kitchen doorway, filling the space with her characteristic energy. She stood with one hand on her hip, wooden spoon raised like a conductor's baton. "Did you change my aunt's soup recipe again? I smell extra garlic. Don't think these old nostrils can't tell the difference?" Maya laughed, the sound bouncing off the walls as she moved to pin the printed program to the corkboard by the entryway. Her fingers smoothed the paper with practiced care. "Just a little extra love, Tia. You know your aunt would approve. She always said food should speak to the heart first, then the stomach." From his perch near the worn stage, 70-year-old Rufus grumbled at the pop music playing softly from June's phone. His weathered hands rested on his cane as he shook his head dramatically. "Back in my day, we had real music," he muttered, though his foot tapped in rhythm and his lips moved silently to the chorus. The afternoon light caught the gleam of his polished shoes. He'd dressed up for rehearsal day, as he always did. The multi-purpose room was slowly transforming for the evening ahead. Folding chairs lined up in neat rows faced the stage, where a podium waited for speeches. Colorful paper banners, carefully made by the center's children, hung from the ceiling beams, gently swaying in the breeze from the old ceiling fans. Maya's small office behind the stage held 25 years of memories. A filing cabinet stuffed with grant applications, faded photographs taped to the walls, and a shoebox overflowing with thank you letters from former students. The desk lamp with its fraying cord had survived 3 renovations, casting the same warm glow over each year's budget challenges. June noticed Maya pausing to straighten the town council meeting flyer on the corkboard, her fingers lingering a moment too long on the paper. "Are you worried about the lease renewal?" she asked softly, her young voice carrying a wisdom beyond her years. Her eyes, so quick to notice others' concerns, watched Maya's face carefully. "We've made it through 25 years of renewals," Maya replied with practiced confidence, though her hand unconsciously touched the small crucifix at her neck, a gesture June had come to recognize as Maya's way of gathering strength. The silver pendant caught the light as Maya's fingers traced its familiar shape. "Now I need to run some errands before the rehearsal tonight. June, you're in charge of the roses. Tia, please don't let Rufus reorganize the chairs again. Last time we had them in a circle and the mayor nearly fell over the arrangement." As the afternoon sun slanted lower, sending long shadows across the worn floorboards, Maya gathered her purse and car keys. The leather bag was cracked with age, much like the building itself, weathered but sturdy, full of purpose. At the door, she turned back to look at her chosen family. June focused intently on her paper flowers, her brow furrowed in concentration as she created beauty from simple materials. Tia stirring the soup with the rhythm of generations, humming an old tune under her breath. Rufus now openly singing along to the music, his aged voice surprisingly clear. Maya's fingers brushed the crucifix once more, drawing invisible strength from its familiar contours. "I'll be back before evening rehearsal," she promised, stepping out into the warm afternoon light that bathed the neighborhood she had served for a quarter-century. The municipal hall buzzed with tension under harsh fluorescent lights. Maya held the photo board steady as she, June, and Pastor Helen made their way to empty seats near the front. The wooden dais loomed ahead, where council members shuffled papers and adjusted microphones, their faces impassive beneath the unforgiving glare. The room smelled of floor polish and stale coffee, and Maya could feel eyes tracking their progress down the center aisle. "Deep breaths," Pastor Helen whispered, patting Maya's hand with weathered fingers that had offered comfort to generations. "Remember why we're here." June clutched a folder of statistics, her knuckles white with nervousness, the pages inside rustling with each trembling movement. Her other hand fidgeted with the collar of her carefully pressed blouse. Ethan Caro approached the podium first, his suit pristine, and his smile practiced, not a hair out of place. The confidence in his stride seemed to part the tension in the room like a knife. "Distinguished council members," he began, his voice smooth as silk, wrapping around the room like expensive cologne. "Our town deserves modern development. The Willow Street area has become problematic." He paused delicately, letting the word hang in the air. "We need to consider safety, property values, and progress. Surely we all want what's best for our children's future." Maya watched several council members nodding, their pens tapping thoughtfully against legal pads. A young woman in the corner held up her phone, live streaming for an online news outlet, her face illuminated by the blue glow of her screen. The sight made Maya's stomach tighten. Whatever happened tonight would be broadcast far beyond these walls. Councilman Roberts cleared his throat, leaning forward with elbows on the table. His wedding ring caught the light as he adjusted his tie. "That black girl who caused trouble last month. Isn't she from your center, Mrs. Brooks?" His emphasis on black wasn't quite subtle enough to miss. A soft, shocked murmur rippled through the room like wind through dry leaves. June stiffened beside Maya, her breathing suddenly shallow and quick. Maya placed a steadying hand on her arm, feeling the girl's pulse racing beneath her skin. "Her name is Keisha Williams," Maya said. As she stood, her voice clear and controlled despite the anger burning in her chest. "She's now attending community college with a full scholarship." Maya lifted her chin, drawing herself up to her full height. "Last year, our center helped 38 students improve their GPAs by an average of 1.5 grades. 17 of our graduates secured full-time employment. We've served this community faithfully for 25 years, offering tutoring, meals, and a safe haven to anyone who needs it." From somewhere in the back, a man chuckled and whispered into his phone, triggering scattered laughter that prickled along Maya's spine. June's hand shot up, ready to speak, her face flushing with indignation, but Maya gave a subtle shake of her head. "Not now. Not like this." The girl slowly lowered her hand, blinking rapidly to hold back tears. As people filed out after the meeting, chair legs scraping against linoleum and conversations bubbling up around them, Ethan appeared at Maya's elbow. The scent of expensive aftershave announced his presence before his words did. "Mrs. Brooks," he said pleasantly, though his eyes were cold as January frost. "There's a simpler solution here. The developers I represent would offer a very fair price for the lot. Wouldn't that be easier than these annual performances?" He gestured vaguely towards the photo board they'd never even had a chance to present. His smile never reached his eyes, which remained calculating and sharp. Maya met his gaze steadily, refusing to be the first to look away. "The center isn't for sale, Mr. Caro. Good evening." She kept her voice even, though her heart hammered against her ribs. Outside in the parking lot, June's composure finally cracked under the weight of the evening. Tears rolled down her cheeks, catching the glow of the streetlights as they walked to Maya's car, the photo board heavy in their arms. The night air was cool against their skin after the stuffy heat of the municipal building. "How can they be so mean?" June whispered, her voice breaking on the last word. "We help people. We make things better. They talk about us like we're garbage to be swept away." Pastor Helen wrapped an arm around June's shoulders as they walked through the dark parking lot, their footsteps echoing in the night air. The older woman's touch was gentle but strong, a lifeline in the darkness. Above them, stars punched holes in the black velvet sky, indifferent to the small human dramas playing out below. The community center stood silent in the late hours, its windows reflecting the amber glow of a single street lamp outside. The building, usually buzzing with teenage laughter and bustling activity, had settled into an almost sacred hush. Inside, June wiped down tables with methodical strokes, her slender fingers working the cloth in small circles, while Marcus, their evening volunteer, gathered bulging trash bags from the day's activities, the plastic rustling in the quiet. "I can finish up," Marcus offered, noticing the dark smudges beneath June's tired eyes and the slight slump in her normally straight posture. His voice echoed slightly in the empty room. Maya glanced at her watch, the face illuminated briefly in the dim light. Nearly 11. Her own fatigue pressed against her shoulders like a physical weight. 10 more minutes, then we're all heading home. It's been a long enough day," she said, her warm voice holding the gentle authority that made even the most rebellious teens listen. She ran her hand over her face, feeling the day's tensions etched in the lines around her eyes. After double-checking the locks with practiced hands and setting the alarm with a familiar series of beeps, Maya drove home through quiet streets, leaving June and Marcus to complete the final tasks. The center settled into nighttime stillness, a peaceful cocoon broken only by the soft swoosh of June's cleaning cloth against the tabletops and the rhythmic padding of Marcus's footsteps across the worn linoleum floor. Just past midnight, as Marcus gathered his belongings near the back entrance, he noticed something white beneath the door, a slip peeking in from the outside world. He bent down, knees cracking slightly, to retrieve what looked like a piece of paper that had been deliberately slid under the door. The flyer's paper felt cheap and rough between his fingers, clearly run through a copy machine multiple times until the edges were slightly frayed. Crude block letters sprawled across the page in thick black marker, the ink still carrying a sharp chemical smell. His breath caught in his throat as he read the words, each one landing like a stone in his stomach. The message was ugly, hateful, filled with thinly veiled threats about cleaning up the neighborhood and multiple pointed references to that black girl. At the bottom, a red symbol had been stamped with uneven pressure, something that looked like a twisted cross or flame, its edges blurred but its meaning unmistakable. "June," he called out, his voice shaking with an urgency that immediately made her look up from where she was arranging art supplies. "We need to go, now!" The paper trembled in his hand. By morning, the damage had spread like a virus through their community. Phones buzzed with notifications as volunteers woke to find a Facebook post circulating in local groups. Someone had taken a photo of June speaking passionately at a previous center event and added cruel captions mocking her race, her age, and her earnestness. The post tagged the center repeatedly, drawing a stream of mocking comments from accounts with generic avatars and few followers. Maya arrived early, the circles under her eyes betraying a night of little sleep, her phone already ringing for the third time since dawn. "Mayor's office," the screen displayed in bold letters. She let it go to voicemail, her hands trembling slightly as she unlocked the front door, the familiar jingle of her keys now sounding like a warning. Inside, she moved straight to the large corkboard that dominated the main hall, the hateful flyer gripped tightly in her hands, its edges crumpled from her grip. With deliberate movements, almost ceremonial in their precision, she pinned it up, a visible reminder of what they faced, refusing to hide the ugliness that had found them. Then, from her worn leather bag, she withdrew 2 photographs she'd brought from home, items she'd never before displayed at the center. The first showed a well-worn leather motorcycle jacket with distinctive patches sewn with expert care, the kind of insignia that told stories to those who knew how to read them. Red and black symbols that once meant fear to those who saw them coming. The second was a wedding photo, showing Maya in a simple white dress beside a tall man with steel gray hair pulled back from a weathered face. Despite his imposing presence, Silas Raven King's eyes held a gentleness that contradicted his rugged appearance. His arm was wrapped protectively around her waist, his wedding band catching the light, a gleaming promise of a different life. She placed these photos next to the flyer with careful, reverent touches, her fingers lingering on the images as if drawing strength from the paper. Through the large front windows, she could see Mrs. Patterson from next door slow her brisk morning walk to stare curiously at the corkboard display. The older woman's eyes widened in recognition as she processed the jacket patches in the photo, her hand flying to her mouth. She hurried away with surprising speed for her age, already pulling out her phone from her pastel cardigan pocket. Within minutes, whispers spread through the neighborhood like wildfire, jumping from porch to porch and phone to phone. Everyone knew what those patches meant, the history they represented, the power they once commanded, and who Maya's husband had once been before he became the quiet, respectful man who fixed their cars and mentored troubled boys. The morning light streamed through the windows, casting long, dramatic shadows across the corkboard, where past and present now hung side by side, telling a story few had known until today. Maya stood before the display, her hand unconsciously reaching for the small silver crucifix that hung at her neck, her thumb tracing its familiar shape. The weight of the coming confrontation settled on her shoulders, but her spine straightened with resolve. The mayor's office called again, the phone vibrating against the desk. This time she answered with a steady hand, ready to face whatever came next. Her quiet hello, carrying the strength of someone who had already survived harder battles than this. The rumble of motorcycles drew every eye to Willow Street that morning. One by one, they appeared. 12 riders in weathered leather jackets, their chrome gleaming in the morning sun as they rolled into view like a practiced procession. With methodical precision, they lined their bikes in a perfect row outside the community center, kickstands clicking against pavement in near unison. The street fell silent except for the soft clink of boot heels on pavement as the riders dismounted. Their movements were unhurried, almost ceremonial, as if they'd rehearsed this entrance a dozen times. Leading them was a tall man whose presence commanded attention without seeking it, the kind of natural authority that didn't need to announce itself. Silas Raven King's face bore the marks of years lived hard, healed scars that etched lines across weathered skin, speaking of old stories written in pain and survival. But his eyes held a gentleness that few expected from a man of his stature and reputation. Maya stepped out onto the center's front steps, her cotton cardigan fluttering slightly in the morning breeze, her hand instinctively reaching for the small crucifix that hung around her neck. Her fingers traced its outline through her blouse as she watched Raven move toward her with careful steps, his gravelly voice dropping to a soft rumble that seemed meant for her alone. "Morning, sunshine," he said, the term of endearment worn comfortable between them like a well-loved jacket. "You didn't have to come," she said, but her smile betrayed her relief, the tension in her shoulders visibly easing at his presence. "Course I did." He kissed her temple gently, an intimate gesture that seemed at odds with his imposing frame and the leather vest that bore faded patches of his past life. It's what husbands do. Across the street, Mrs. Patterson stood frozen on her porch, clutching her phone tightly, torn between fear and fascination. Her thumb hovered over the keypad, ready to call someone, though she wasn't quite sure who. Other neighbors peered from behind curtains, blinds parting just enough for curious eyes. A mother in a bright floral dress hurried her children along the sidewalk, casting nervous glances at the row of bikes while gripping her little one's hands a bit too tightly. A news van from the local station screeched to a halt at the corner, tires protesting against the pavement, and a reporter in a crisp blazer jumped out with her cameraman close behind. The woman's eyes scanned the scene hungrily as she adjusted her microphone. They'd clearly expected to capture intimidation and violence, something sensational for the evening broadcast. Instead, they found Raven directing his riders with quiet authority, his large hands gesturing with unexpected grace. "Inside," he told them, voice firm but not harsh. "Back rows, no crowding, no posturing. Keep your colors respectful. We're here to help, not frighten. Remember why we came." The riders filed in, boots heavy on the wooden floor that creaked beneath their weight. They took seats in the rear of the main room, their leather jackets creaking as they settled in, some removing caps or bandanas out of respect for being indoors. Through the windows, their motorcycles stood sentinel, a chrome and steel barrier between the center and whatever might come. a physical manifestation of their protective intent. Pastor Helen's sensible shoes clicked rapidly up the sidewalk, her purposeful stride belying her 60-plus years. She paused only briefly to assess the situation, eyes taking in the motorcycles and the gathering crowd of onlookers, before heading straight for Maya and Raven with determined steps. "The radio's already buzzing," she said, her voice low but steady, adjusting the colorful scarf around her neck. "Ethan Caro's calling it a show of force. He's got the morning talk shows eating it up." As if on cue, a silver sedan drove past slowly, its windows rolled down and its radio clearly audible. Concerning development at the Willow Street Center, where known motorcycle gang members have gathered in what appears to be an attempt at intimidation following yesterday's contentious town meeting. Maya's fingers tightened around Raven's arm, her knuckles whitening slightly. "We can't let this become about violence," she whispered, worry lines appearing between her brows. "These kids need to see a different way forward. They've had enough conflict in their lives already." Raven nodded, understanding deepening the creases around his eyes. His large hand covered hers gently, engulfing it completely. "No threats," he assured her, voice like gravel wrapped in velvet. "No provocations. My guys know the rules, but we're not leaving them unprotected either. Not after those threats." Pastor Helen studied them both, her experienced eyes taking in their body language and the unspoken communication between them. Then she nodded decisively, smoothing her practical skirt. "What if we redirect this energy? Show the community what these men can offer besides protection. Change the narrative before Ethan can cement it." "The riders, most work honest trades now," Raven said thoughtfully, glancing back at his men who sat quietly, respectfully inside. "Mechanics, contractors, skilled labor, men who've rebuilt their lives with their hands." Maya's face brightened, the worry lines softening as possibility took hold. "A job fair? And maybe—" She turned to Raven, excitement sparking in her eyes as she gripped his hand tighter. "Remember that mechanics clinic you used to run over in Riverdale? Teaching kids to fix bikes instead of steal them?" A small smile crossed his weathered face, softening the hard angles. "Could work here. Some of these kids have never had a chance to build something with their own hands." They gathered at one of the center's round tables, Maya, Raven, and Pastor Helen, sketching out plans for community service programs on the back of donation flyers. Maya's handwriting flowed across the page, listing possibilities while Raven nodded, occasionally adding practical considerations in his blocky script. Through the windows, they could see more news vans arriving in a parade of logos and satellite dishes, but inside, the atmosphere remained calm, almost purposeful. The riders sat quietly, some reading donated books to pass the time, others helping June arrange chairs for the upcoming fundraiser, their tattooed arms making quick work of the heavy folding furniture. "It's not about showing strength," Maya said firmly, tapping her pencil on the makeshift plan they'd created. "It's about showing who we really are. All of us. The center, the kids, your guys. We're more than what Ethan wants to paint us as." Raven squeezed her hand under the table, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "We'll do it your way, sunshine. Always have." His voice dropped even lower. "That's why it works." The afternoon sun streamed through the community center's windows, casting long golden rectangles across the worn hardwood floors as volunteers bustled about with renewed purpose. Phone calls echoed through the halls as Maya coordinated with local supporters, her calm voice a steady counterpoint to the nervous energy filling the building. "Yes, Mrs. Johnson, we'd love to have your jazz trio perform," Maya said warmly into the receiver, tucking a loose strand of hair behind her ear. 7 o'clock would be perfect. The acoustics in the main room are lovely for brass." She made a note in her worn planning notebook, where color-coded lists and precise times covered every page, the margins filled with tiny reminders and words of encouragement to herself. In the corner near the bulletin board, covered with community announcements, June paced back and forth, index cards clutched in her trembling hands. Her sneakers squeaked slightly on the polished floor with each pivot. "Good evening, everyone. Thank you for supporting the Willow Street Community Center." She faltered, biting her lower lip, then shook her head and started again, her voice a touch stronger. "Good evening. Your presence here tonight means more than you know." Outside, Raven had transformed the parking lot into an impromptu mechanics station. The sleeves of his faded denim shirt were rolled up to reveal forearms marked with the faded remnants of tattoos. He laid out tools with careful precision on a folding table, each wrench and socket perfectly aligned like surgical instruments. "Free motorcycle maintenance checks," read a hand-painted sign propped nearby, the letters bold and clean against the white cardboard. "Marcus, come here," he called to a young man hovering uncertainly at the edge of the lot, hands shoved deep in his pockets. Marcus approached, his shoulders hunched as though expecting criticism. "Let me show you something about engines. Might come in handy for that mechanics apprenticeship we talked about." Raven's voice was gentle but firm, the kind that expected respect but offered it first. Inside, Tia commanded the kitchen like a general, her colorful apron spattered with evidence of her labors. The scent of cumin, garlic, and baking pastry filled the warm air. "Those empanadas need to be turned now," she directed a nervous volunteer with a flick of her wooden spoon. "They should be golden, not burnt, mi cielo. And somebody check on Maya's soup. It's her secret weapon with donors." She wiped her hands on her apron and surveyed the spread of dishes community members had dropped off. Casseroles in mismatched dishes, each labeled with masking tape and names, platters of homemade cookies, and trays of sandwiches cut into perfect triangles. The multi-purpose room slowly transformed under careful hands. Children's artwork, bright paintings and careful drawings found homes on display boards that volunteers had draped with inexpensive blue fabric to make them look more professional. Each piece had a small card beneath it. Artist, Tommy Martinez, age 8, my neighborhood, and Sarah Chen, age 11, what community means to me. A colorful rendition of diverse hands linked in a circle. Maya paused from adjusting a crooked tablecloth to watch June practicing. The girl's voice shook less with each attempt, her spine straightening incrementally as she found her rhythm. The afternoon light caught the tiny butterfly barrette in her dark hair. "You're getting stronger," Maya encouraged, her eyes crinkling with genuine pride. "Remember to breathe from your diaphragm, like we practiced. Feel your words coming up from your center." "But what if they don't listen?" June whispered, clutching her index cards tighter, leaving small finger impressions on the edges. "What if they just see me as some kid?" "Then we'll make them hear with our actions," Maya replied, gently smoothing June's hair where it had fallen across her forehead. "Your words matter, sweetheart. And sometimes the youngest voice in the room is the one that cuts through all the noise." The phone rang again, its shrill tone cutting through the peaceful industry. Maya's face tightened as she recognized the number, her shoulders tensing almost imperceptibly before she answered. "Mrs. Brooks?" Ethan's voice oozed concern, smooth as honey, but with a subtle edge that made Maya's skin prickle. "I felt I should inform you that several potential investors have expressed safety concerns about today's developments. Those motorcycle enthusiasts do have a certain reputation." "The mechanics clinic is completely legal," Maya replied evenly, pressing the record button on her phone's app with a practiced thumb. "And every volunteer has passed a background check. We appreciate your concern, Ethan." Of course. But the council may need to take action to ensure public safety. I'm sure you understand. We wouldn't want anything to overshadow your lovely event." The threat lay beneath his polite words like a snake under leaves, ready to strike at the most vulnerable moment. After hanging up, Maya's hands shook slightly as she saved the recording and labeled it with the date and time. But she squared her shoulders and returned to work, refusing to let fear take root. Raven stepped inside, wiping grease from his calloused hands with a red shop rag. The scent of motor oil clung to him, oddly comforting in its earthiness. "Marcus is a natural with engines," he reported, a rare smile softening the hard angles of his face. "Kid just needed someone to show him how. He's got gentle hands, perfect for detail work." The afternoon light began to soften into evening, the golden glow deepening to amber as shadows lengthened across the floor. Volunteers strung paper lanterns across the parking lot, creating pools of gentle light that swayed in the evening breeze. Inside, printed biographies of mentors and success stories lined the walls in simple black frames. "Meet Our Mentors," with photographs and personal stories, and "Where Are They Now?" featuring smiling graduates in caps and gowns, work uniforms, and business attire. The jazz trio arrived early to set up, their bass player testing the acoustics with a few deep notes that resonated through the wooden floors. June helped arrange chairs into elegant rows, while Tia directed the final food preparations, her commanding presence ensuring everything would be perfect. The smell of Maya's chicken soup, rich with herbs and vegetables from the community garden, mingled with freshly brewed coffee and warm cookies just out of the oven. As dusk settled, Maya stood in the center's doorway, taking a moment to breathe and center herself. The lantern swayed gently in the evening breeze, casting warm, dancing light across familiar faces. Volunteers straightening name tags, neighbors arriving with covered dishes, and Ravens riders still in their leather jackets, but now wearing neatly printed name tags and ready to welcome guests with unexpected gentleness. The old brass bell above the door gleamed in the lantern light, polished specially for the occasion. Maya reached for it, her fingers brushing the cool metal, and its clear, bright ring announced the beginning of the fundraiser, a sound of hope and determination that seemed to hang in the air. "Ready?" she asked June, who stood beside her in a carefully pressed dress, her posture now straight and purposeful despite the fluttering pulse visible at her throat. "Ready," June replied, her voice steady at last, chin lifted with newfound confidence. The evening sparkled with possibility. Lanterns swayed gently in the breeze, their golden light reflecting off wine glasses and creating dancing shadows on the walls. The aroma of Maya's chicken soup wafted through the air, mingling with coffee and fresh-baked cookies from Tia's kitchen. June stood at the podium, her hand steady now as she surveyed the crowd. "When I first came to the Willow Street Community Center," she began, her voice clear and strong, "I was afraid to speak up in class, afraid to dream too big." She paused, meeting Maya's encouraging gaze. "But here, I found more than just after-school programs. I found a family who believed in me, who taught me that my voice matters." The audience leaned forward, caught by her sincerity. Several people dabbed at their eyes as June continued. "Last year, 98% of our senior participants graduated high school. 85% are now in college or trade programs. These aren't just numbers, they're dreams coming true, one student at a time." Applause erupted as June finished. In the back, Maya noticed Ethan watching with a slight frown, making notes on his phone. Outside, Raven's maintenance table had drawn a curious crowd. "It's simple," he explained to an interested parent, his gravelly voice gentle. "We teach kids mechanical skills, but more importantly, we show them honest work brings honest reward. Every one of our mentors has walked a hard road and chosen a better path." The donation box filled steadily. Mrs. Henderson, a local business owner, stood up during the pledge drive. I'll match donations up to $50,000, she announced, once the center's lease is renewed. More applause followed, along with a flurry of checkbooks opening. After the crowds thinned, volunteers gathered in the kitchen. Maya served leftover soup in mismatched bowls, and laughter filled the warm space. "Thank you all," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "This place stands because of you." "The soup helps," Tia joked, breaking the sentimental moment. Everyone chuckled. Late that night, across town, a local tabloid editor's computer pinged with a new email. The attached photo showed what appeared to be Raven at a violent scene, though something about the shadows seemed off. The editor's phone rang immediately. "Ethan Caro's office," a smooth voice said. "I believe you received something interesting." Back at the center, Maya moved through the quiet rooms, turning off lights. The day's success felt like a warm blanket around her shoulders. In the small back room, June lay on the overnight cot, her speech cards still clutched in one hand. "You were amazing today," Maya whispered, tucking a blanket around the sleeping girl. She smoothed June's hair back, remembering her own trembling voice at that age. The last lantern cast a gentle glow through the window as Maya gathered her things, finally allowing herself to breathe deeply. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they had shown what community truly meant. She hung June's speech on the corkboard, right next to the center's mission statement. Building dreams, building lives. The words seemed to glow in the dim light, a promise for tomorrow. The morning sun felt harsh and accusatory as Maya unfolded the local tabloid on her desk. Her coffee went cold, forgotten beside her, as she stared at the front-page headline in bold black letters that seemed to shout from the page. "Violent past haunts center. Security concerns rise as ex-gang leader's history exposed." The photo beneath showed what appeared to be Raven in his leather jacket, standing over a fallen figure on dirty pavement. The shadows were strange, the lighting uneven, with odd angles that didn't quite match. But casual readers flipping through their morning paper wouldn't notice those subtle details. Maya's hands trembled slightly as her phone buzzed repeatedly with notifications, the device skittering across her desk like an anxious insect. "This can't be happening," she whispered to the empty office, her throat tightening. The peace they'd built felt suddenly fragile, like a sandcastle before rising tide. June burst through the office door, tears streaming down her face, her backpack sliding off one shoulder. "They're saying horrible things online," she choked out, holding up her phone with a shaking hand. Her eyes were red-rimmed, mascara smudged beneath them. "Someone sent me a message saying I should be scared to come here, that we're harboring criminals." Maya pushed away from her desk and pulled June into a tight hug, feeling the girl's shoulders shake against her. The teenager smelled like strawberry shampoo and fear. "Let me see that message," she said firmly, keeping her voice steady despite the anger building in her chest. The anonymous DM was crude and threatening, using language that made Maya's stomach clench into a hard knot. "They don't even know us," June sobbed against Maya's shoulder. "They don't know anything about Raven or what we do here." The center's main line rang constantly, its shrill tone cutting through the morning quiet like an alarm. Through the glass partition, Maya could see Tia answering calls in the front office, her usually cheerful face drawn tight, one hand pressing the phone to her ear while the other gestured in frustration. "No, that's not accurate at all. Yes, we maintain strict safety protocols. No, I cannot comment on... Please, if you'd just listen." Tia's usually warm, melodic voice had grown strained as she fielded call after call. At 10 o'clock, their largest donor's secretary called, her voice clipped and professional. Mr. Patterson is withdrawing his pledge, she stated flatly, not bothering with pleasantries. He can't risk association with, well, you understand, the optics are problematic. The optics? Maya repeated, gripping the phone tightly. You mean a fabricated photo and baseless accusations? I'm just relaying the message, Ms. Johnson. Good day. The line went dead. Maya drove downtown to the tabloid's office, a small brick building wedged between a coffee shop and a tax preparation service. Her fingers gripped the steering wheel so tight her knuckles went white, her mind racing with all the words she wanted to say. The editor, Mr. Collins, a balding man with wire-rimmed glasses, barely looked up from his cluttered desk when she entered his cramped office. That photo is fake, Maya declared, placing both palms firmly on his desk, leaning forward. You need to print a retraction. Now. Collins shrugged, his shoulders barely moving beneath his wrinkled button-down shirt. Our source stands by the image. Unless you can prove it's fabricated. He let the sentence dangle between them like bait. Your source? Maya pressed, narrowing her eyes. You mean Ethan Caro's office? This has his fingerprints all over it. I don't reveal sources, Collins replied smoothly, finally meeting her gaze with practiced indifference. But the city council is calling an emergency session to discuss security concerns around your little center. Might want to prepare for that. He turned back to his computer, dismissing her. Back at the center, Raven stood in the parking lot, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the asphalt. His face was carved from stone as he read the article, the paper crumpled slightly in his large hands. Several of his riders waited nearby on their motorcycles, engines idling with a low rumble, but he waved them off with a firm gesture. I won't give them ammunition, he told Maya quietly as she approached, his gravel voice even lower than usual. No retaliation, no threats. That's what they're hoping for. He folded the paper carefully. But I think I know who might have access to old photos that could be doctored. Maya touched his arm, feeling the tension in his muscles. Be careful. This feels calculated. Always am, sweetheart. He kissed her forehead gently, his lips warm against her skin, before mounting his bike. The machine roared to life beneath him, and he gave her one last meaningful look before pulling away. The motorcycle repair co-op sat on the industrial edge of town, a corrugated metal building surrounded by chain-link fence, all concrete and steel under the harsh midday sun. Raven's old friend Tommy, a bear of a man with a salt and pepper beard, wiped grease from his calloused hands with a red shop rag as they talked in the garage's cramped office. Lenny? Tommy scratched his beard thoughtfully, leaving a smudge of black. Yeah, he had access to the old photo albums. Club historian, remember? But he moved down south last year. Left some boxes, though. Never came back for 'em. He led Raven through a narrow hallway to a storage room piled with forgotten belongings. They found the original photo in a dusty leather album, protected by yellowing plastic. It showed Raven helping someone who'd fallen off their bike during a charity ride. Completely different context, different lighting, the fallen rider reaching up gratefully while Raven extended a helping hand. Staged hit piece, Tommy growled, his face darkening as he compared the original to the newspaper version. Someone went to a lot of trouble. Photoshopped it to look like you were standing over someone you'd beaten. He shook his head in disgust. Low, even for politicians. Raven nodded grimly, tucking the original photo carefully into his jacket. Question is, who hired the person with the skills to do it? And how did they get access to these old photos? Meanwhile, June sat hunched in the center's computer room, trying to focus on her college application essay. The blank document stared back at her, cursor blinking accusingly. Another notification popped up on her screen, more cruel comments on the local Facebook group, People she'd known her whole life suddenly questioning whether she was safe, whether her art classes were just a front for gang recruitment. She closed the browser with trembling fingers, but not before seeing Ethan Caro's measured response. The council must act swiftly to ensure our community's safety. Our children deserve protection. Maya found her there, staring blankly at the computer screen, hands limp in her lap. "Maybe," June whispered, not looking up. "Maybe I should stay home for a while, until this blows over." "No," Maya said firmly, pulling up a chair beside her. The metal legs scraped loudly against the linoleum floor. "That's exactly what they want. They're trying to scare us apart, make us hide. We stand together, remember? That's what we teach here." She squeezed June's shoulder. "Your voice matters most when others try to silence it." The afternoon light slanted through the dusty windows as they worked side by side on June's essay, deliberately ignoring the constant ping of phone notifications. Outside, a news van from the local station idled in the parking lot, waiting for comment, its satellite dish raised like a curious periscope. Maya's phone showed 3 missed calls from Pastor Helen, likely trying to offer support or strategy. The fabricated photo had done its damage, spreading through town like wildfire, feeding existing prejudices and fears. Now they had to find a way to prove the truth before the emergency council session scheduled for tomorrow morning. Maya watched June typing determinedly at her keyboard, chin raised slightly, refusing to let fear win, and felt a fierce surge of pride mixed with worry. The truth would come out. It had to. But would it come out in time? And even if it did, could they repair the damage to the center's reputation? The wooden pews of First Methodist Church creaked under the weight of concerned citizens. Late afternoon sun filtered through stained glass, casting colored shadows across worried faces. Pastor Helen stood at the pulpit, her calm presence a stark contrast to the tension filling the sanctuary. "We're here to discuss recent events with clear heads and open hearts," she began, but murmurs already rippled through the crowd. Ethan Caro rose from his front row seat, brandishing the morning's tabloid. "This image confirms what we've been warning about," he announced, his voice carrying perfectly. "Can we really trust someone with this kind of history around our children?" Maya sat between June and Tia, watching the girl shrink further into herself with each accusation. June's phone buzzed again. She switched it off with trembling hands. "The photo is fabricated," Maya stated, standing up. Her voice wavered slightly but grew stronger as she continued. "We need to investigate the truth, not jump to conclusions. The center has 25 years of documented success. One suspicious photo shouldn't erase that." "My daughter won't go anywhere near that place now," a woman called out. "Not with ex-gang members hanging around." From the back of the church, Raven sat quietly, his large frame somehow contained. 3 men Maya didn't recognize approached him during a break, speaking in low voices. She caught fragments. "Thought you'd gone soft?" and "Debts don't disappear." Raven's jaw tightened, but he remained still, refusing to engage. "The council needs to act now," someone shouted. "Revoke the lease." Pastor Helen raised her hands. "Please, we're a community that values truth and justice. Let's take time to verify facts." June had prepared a speech defending the center, but now she just stared at her lap, shoulders hunched. The online harassment had stolen her voice. The mayor, looking uncomfortable in the front pew, cleared his throat. "I'm requesting an independent review of the situation. We'll postpone any action for 1 week while we gather facts." A motorcycle engine roared past the church windows, followed by several more. The noise grew to a thunder as Marv's group circled the block repeatedly. Even inside, they could hear hoots and revving engines. "See?" Ethan gestured toward the windows. "This is exactly the element we're concerned about." Maya stood again. "Those riders aren't associated with our center. Silas runs a legitimate job training program. We have documentation of every success story." "Documentation can be faked," someone interrupted. "Just like those kids' improved grades." June made a small sound, like she'd been struck. Maya reached for her hand. "1 week," the mayor repeated firmly. "We'll examine all evidence before making any decisions." The meeting dispersed as dusk approached, but people gathered in small clusters outside the church, voices urgent and afraid. Raven walked to his lone bike, parked away from the others. The 3 men from earlier watched him go, their expressions dark with old grudges. Maya helped Pastor Helen stack prayer books, their movements automatic and tired. "Thank you for trying," Maya said quietly. "Truth takes time," Pastor Helen replied, squeezing her arm, "but it always comes out." Outside, Marv's group made another pass, their engines deliberately loud. June flinched at each roar, and Maya guided her quickly to the car. The setting sun cast long shadows across the church steps as people hurried home, leaving questions and accusations hanging in the humid evening air. The mayor's week-long pause felt less like a victory and more like holding their breath. They had 7 days to prove the photo was fake. 7 days while the community's trust hung by a thread. Morning sunlight streamed through the center's windows as Maya spread documents across her desk. Raven stood near the door, making calls on his cell phone. "Mike?" "Yeah, it's Raven. Remember that photographer, Lenny? Need to know if he's still at that studio off Maple?" He paused, listening. "Thanks, brother. I appreciate it." Maya looked up from her papers. "Any leads?" "A few old chapter members who went straight are helping out. They remember Lenny from back when he'd photograph bike shows." At 10 o'clock, they drove to Lenny's small photography studio, a cramped space above a laundromat. The walls displayed faded motorcycle rally posters and wedding portraits. Lenny fidgeted when they entered. "Look, I just process photos for clients," he said before they could ask anything. "Someone used one of my old photos," Raven said quietly. "Made it look like something it wasn't." Lenny's eyes darted to the door. "I got paid through regular channels. PR firm downtown." "Which firm?" Maya pressed. "Some guy named Trevor handled it. That's all I know." Lenny wrung his hands. "Look, I didn't know they'd use it like that." Marcus met them outside Trevor's advertising shop the next morning. The young man had traded his old street clothes for pressed khakis and a polo shirt, part of Raven's mentorship program. "I can go in first," Marcus offered. "Make him comfortable." Trevor, a skinny man in his 30s, blanched when Raven followed Marcus inside. I just format ads, that's all." "Who hired you?" Raven's voice remained steady. "Some consultant. Met with Watson. You know, from the campaign team?" Trevor's words tumbled out. "They wanted old photos. Said it was for a background check." Meanwhile, at the center, Maya compiled evidence. Bank statements showing consistent donations, student success records, and the recorded phone call where Ethan hinted at council action. When reporters asked Ethan about Trevor's statement, he smiled smoothly. "I've never heard of this person. These accusations seem desperate." June hadn't shown up for classes in 2 days. Maya found her curled up at home, phone turned off. "They're saying horrible things online," June whispered. "About me, about all of us." That evening, while Maya locked up, she found a note slipped under the door. The message was typed, "Make it easy. Close now or watch the center disappear." Her hands shook as she read it, but she carefully placed it in a folder with the other evidence. The council vote was just days away, and someone was getting nervous. The investigation had revealed a trail, from Lenny to Trevor to Watson, but Ethan remained untouchable behind careful denials. Maya stared at the threatening note, wondering what would break first. The truth, or the center itself? She pulled out her phone to call Raven. They needed to plan their next move carefully. The council vote was coming, and they were running out of time. 3 tense days passed after the investigation. The local tabloid churned out daily editorials questioning the center's safety. Each morning, Maya collected the papers from the center's steps, her heart heavy as she read the increasingly hostile headlines. During those days, Raven gathered a team of volunteer paralegals and retired lawyers at the motorcycle repair shop. They pored over city codes and lease regulations, surrounded by the smell of motor oil and the sound of wrenches clicking against engines. Pastor Helen organized evening prayer vigils on the church lawn. Candlelight flickered across worried faces as she led them in prayers for wisdom and justice. "Let truth prevail," she would say, her voice steady and sure. At the center, volunteers took shifts, monitoring social media and screening messages before they reached June. The young girl spent most of her time in the art room, painting with shaking hands but refusing to give up. Now, on the evening of the council vote, the chamber was packed shoulder to shoulder. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Maya clutched her folder of evidence. June sat between Pastor Helen and Tia, who kept squeezing her hand reassuringly. Ethan approached the podium first, his suit pristine and his smile practiced. "Members of the council," he began, holding up the fabricated photo. "This image raises serious questions about the company our community center keeps." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Maya noticed how some council members leaned forward, their faces concerned. When her turn came, Maya stood tall. "I have here," she said, lifting her folder, 25 years of funding letters, testimonials from students who found their way to college through our programs, documentation of every penny spent." She played the recorded phone call, Ethan's veiled threats filling the chamber. The vote count was agonizingly close. Council President Thompson cleared his throat. "Given the serious nature of allegations on both sides, this council moves to postpone the final decision pending an independent municipal audit." He paused, shuffling papers. "Additionally, we recommend enhanced security measures as a condition for continued operation." Ethan's face remained neutral, but Maya caught the slight upturn of his lips as he texted someone. Outside, the evening air crackled with tension. Supporters hugged Maya, their words of encouragement hollow against the weight of uncertainty. June wiped tears from her eyes as Pastor Helen led her toward the parking lot. Suddenly, a sharp crack split the air. Paint splattered across the center's sign, bright red dripping down like blood. A figure in a dark hoodie turned to run, but Marcus, who'd been helping elderly visitors to their cars, sprinted after them. "Got him!" Marcus called out, his mentor training evident in the controlled way he held the struggling vandal. The police arrived quickly. As they cuffed the man, a crumpled receipt fell from his pocket. Maya picked it up, her hands trembling as she read the detailed payment from a familiar campaign account. Raven stood beside her, his voice low. "That's the proof we needed." The receipt shook in Maya's grip as she stared at the numbers that tied everything together. After weeks of shadows and whispers, here was something solid, something real. Police officers gathered around, taking statements and photographs. The paint on the sign continued to drip, but now it felt less like a wound and more like evidence of someone's desperate mistake. Marcus stood nearby, still breathing hard from the chase but standing proud. His eyes met Raven's, and the older man nodded in approval. This was exactly what their mentorship program was about, standing up for what's right, but doing it the right way. As camera phones flashed and the crowd pressed closer, Maya carefully folded the receipt and placed it in her folder. Whatever came next would start with this piece of paper, this one solid link in a chain that led straight to Ethan's door. The center's back office felt cramped with 5 people hunched around Maya's desk. The receipt lay in the center, illuminated by a desk lamp that cast long shadows on the wall. Pastor Helen adjusted her reading glasses while Marcus pointed at the items listed. "Look here," Marcus said, tapping the paper. "It's not just the paint. There's a whole list of promotional materials from last month." Maya opened her laptop and pulled up the public campaign finance records she'd downloaded earlier. Raven leaned in, his leather jacket creaking as he compared the dates. "Same company?" he said quietly. "Trevor's PR firm shows up 3 times in Ethan's expenditures." Pastor Helen made a soft, clicking sound with her tongue. "The question isn't just what we can prove," she said, "but what's the right way to handle this information?" Raven straightened up, his face set with determination. "We need to confront him directly. Public, honorable. Let him face what he's done. The community deserves to see the truth." "No," Maya said firmly, thinking of June's tearful face earlier. "We can't risk escalating this into a spectacle. What if his supporters retaliate? We need to be smart about this." Marcus nodded. "I know someone who might help. Remember Trevor's assistant? The one who quit last month? She told me she felt guilty about something big." A knock at the door made them all jump. June stood there, her arms wrapped around herself, looking smaller than her 17 years. "I need to tell you something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Maya pulled up a chair. "What is it, sweetheart?" June's hands twisted in her lap. "A few months ago, before all this started, I was at the bus stop near the center. A man came up to me. He said..." Her voice cracked. "He said I should be careful about speaking up for the center, that people were watching." Maya's heart clenched. She pulled June into a tight hug while the others exchanged worried glances. "Why didn't you tell us?" Maya asked gently. "I thought I was being silly. I forgot about it until now, with everything happening." June wiped her eyes. "I don't want to be the reason the center gets hurt." "Listen to me," Maya said firmly, holding June's shoulders. "You are not responsible for any of this. We won't let anyone use you as a scapegoat. Do you understand?" June nodded, leaning into Maya's embrace. Pastor Helen cleared her throat. "Marcus, can you arrange a meeting with Trevor's assistant? Somewhere neutral, public?" "The coffee shop on Main," Marcus suggested. "She usually studies there in the afternoon." Raven pulled out his phone. "I'll have a couple of my guys keep watch from a distance, just to be safe." Maya looked at the receipt again, then at June's tear-stained face. The right path forward wasn't just about justice. It was about protecting everyone involved while bringing the truth to light. "Tomorrow afternoon, then," Maya decided. "We'll meet with the assistant first, get her testimony properly documented. Then we take everything, the receipt, the testimony, the phone recording, to the municipal auditor." "And Ethan?" Raven asked. "The truth will come out," Pastor Helen said softly. "But it needs to come out the right way." They worked late into the night, organizing documents and planning their approach. June fell asleep on the small couch in the corner, finally peaceful. Maya covered her with a blanket, then returned to the desk where the others continued their careful preparation. The receipt sat in the center of it all, a small piece of paper that could change everything if they handled it right. The afternoon sun streamed through the cafe windows, casting long shadows across the wooden tables. Maya sat with her hands wrapped around a cooling cup of coffee, watching the door. Raven stood near the counter, pretending to study the menu while keeping an eye on the street outside. A young woman in her mid-20s entered, clutching her laptop bag close. Her eyes darted around the room before landing on Maya. "Kira?" Maya asked softly. The woman nodded, sliding into the seat across from Maya. Her hands trembled as she set down her bag. "I've been wanting to come forward," Kira said, her voice barely above a whisper. "What they asked us to do, it wasn't right." Raven pulled up a chair, keeping his movements slow and gentle to avoid startling her. "Take your time. You're safe here." Kira pulled out her laptop, fingers shaking as she typed in her password. "They told us it was just a civic campaign, normal PR work. But then Trevor started asking for weird things." She turned the screen toward them, showing a folder of emails. "Like finding old photos of motorcycle clubs, coordinating social media attacks." Maya leaned forward, reading carefully. "Who gave these orders?" "It came through Trevor, but..." Kira swallowed hard. "He always took calls from this one number. I saw the contact once. It was labeled EC Campaign." Raven and Maya exchanged glances. Kira continued pulling up documents, including text message transcripts between Trevor and a freelance photographer about staging photos. "Would you be willing to share this with the municipal auditor?" Maya asked gently. Tears welled in Kira's eyes. "I'm scared. They know where I live, where my mom lives." "We can help," Maya assured her. "We can arrange safe accommodation and cover your expenses while you testify." "No strings," Raven added firmly. "Just the truth." As they discussed details, Maya's phone buzzed. It was a news alert. Ethan was holding an impromptu press conference. "These baseless accusations are nothing but dirty politics." Ethan's voice came through the speaker, smooth and controlled. "The community center is trying to distract from real safety concerns." Kira's face went pale. "He knows someone's talking." Before they could respond, Raven's phone rang. The caller ID showed a name he hadn't seen in years. Marv. Raven stepped outside to take the call, returning a few minutes later with a tight expression. "Marv says he saw Trevor meeting with Ethan's campaign manager at Denny's 3 weeks ago," Raven reported. "Says he'll testify. For a price." "What does he want?" Maya asked. "Help with some old legal troubles. Wants me to pull strings with some former contacts." Maya watched Raven's face, seeing the moral struggle there. "We can't compromise on this," she said softly. Raven nodded. "Already told him no. Said if he wants to do the right thing, the door's open. But we're not making deals." They turned back to Kira, who was watching them with a mixture of fear and hope. "Here's what we can offer," Maya said, laying out their proposal. "A safe place to stay, covered expenses, and our word that we'll stand by you through this. No compromises, no deals, just support while you tell the truth." Kira wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. "Okay," she said. "I'll do it. Not for any reward, but because it's right." They spent the next hour carefully documenting everything, making copies, and arranging for Kira's temporary relocation. As the afternoon light began to fade, they prepared to leave. "Remember," Maya told Kira, "you're not alone in this. We'll face whatever comes next together." A tense week crawled by in the small town. The municipal building buzzed with activity as lawyers and officials came and went, carrying stacks of papers and urgent whispers. Inside the community center, life continued with determined normalcy. Maya kept the doors open, welcoming kids for tutoring and meals. Pastor Helen set up counseling sessions, paying special attention to June, who still jumped at unexpected sounds, but was slowly finding her voice again. Raven threw himself into practical work. His motorcycle maintenance clinic expanded into a full job training program. "Best way to fight fear is to keep building," he told the young men who gathered around his workbench, learning to repair engines and rebuild their lives. When the auditor's hearing finally began, the chamber was packed. Kira sat at the front table, hands clasped tightly together. Her testimony came out clear and steady. The orders were specific, she explained, pointing to highlighted sections of emails on the projector screen. We were told to create what they called strategic pressure points against the center. Trevor's text messages appeared next, revealing a calculated campaign to plant false stories and coordinate online attacks. The photographer who had staged the violent scene shuffled to the witness stand, avoiding everyone's eyes. Yes, I manipulated the image, he admitted. I was paid $5,000 to make it look like recent violence. A stir went through the crowd when Marv walked in, his leather jacket creaking as he took the oath. Saw them plain as day at Denny's, he testified, describing Trevor meeting with Ethan's campaign manager. They were passing folders back and forth, real secretive-like. The financial evidence landed like hammer blows. Bank records showed transfers from a shell company to the PR firm, then traced back to an account linked to Ethan's campaign fund. By mid-afternoon, Ethan's campaign manager had resigned. He provided a damning email chain showing Ethan's direct request for a strategic push to undermine the center's credibility. Ethan himself sat stone-faced through the proceedings. When questioned, he maintained a careful distance. I gave no specific directives about methods, he insisted. If members of my team acted inappropriately, that was without my knowledge. But the evidence painted a different picture. The auditor's preliminary report, delivered late that afternoon, stated there was probable cause to believe the negative campaign against the Willow Street Community Center was coordinated and funded through channels connected to Mr. Caro's re-election committee. The local paper's editor stood up during the final session, announcing they would run a correction about the fabricated photo. It wasn't the full apology Maya had hoped for, but it was a start. At the back of the room, June sat with her shoulders hunched, emotionally drained from weeks of tension. Raven moved quietly to stand behind her chair, placing a steady hand on her shoulder. She reached up to grasp his fingers, drawing strength from his silent support. Maya watched them from her seat at the front, feeling the first real breath of relief she'd had in weeks. The truth was finally coming to light, piece by careful piece. As people began filing out of the chamber, Pastor Helen caught Maya's eye and nodded toward the setting sun outside. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, the community's reaction, the process of healing, the work of rebuilding trust. But for now, there was this moment of vindication, this first step toward justice. 3 quiet days followed the auditor's report. Pastor Helen held special services focused on healing. Small groups gathered in living rooms and coffee shops, processing what had happened to their town. The community center remained open but subdued, as if everyone needed time to catch their breath. On the 4th evening, the town hall's wooden benches creaked under the weight of concerned citizens. Ethan sat ramrod straight at the front, his usual polish cracking around the edges. The council had already voted to restore the center's lease that morning, with new oversight measures in place. Several major donors had publicly renewed their support. "We stand with truth and community," one businessman declared, holding up a check. But money wasn't what everyone had come to see. Marv stepped forward first, his motorcycle boots echoing on the wooden floor. "You went after good people," he said, looking directly at Ethan. "And you used lies to do it." Kira followed, clutching a folder of evidence. "I helped spread those lies," she admitted. "But I'm making it right. Mr. Caro, you need to tell them why. Why did you really target the center?" Something in Ethan's facade cracked. His hands began to shake. 15 years ago, he started, voice unsteady. "My sister Sarah died in an arson fire. The investigation, some of Raven's old crew were there that night. They knew things, but no one would talk." The room fell silent. Ethan's composure crumbled entirely. "I blamed them. all of them. When I saw Raven with the center, with Maya, I wanted him to lose something he loved. I wanted him to feel what I felt. His words tumbled out now, raw and messy. I hired the firm. I told them to pressure the center, to dig up dirt on Raven. When they couldn't find anything real, I let them create it. I wanted to believe he was still the same man from back then. June sat between Maya and Raven, tears streaming down her face. Ethan turned to them directly. "I'm sorry," he said, voice breaking. "I'm sorry I used you, June. I'm sorry I tried to destroy something good because of an old wound that never healed." Maya stood slowly. The room held its breath. "Grief can make us cruel," she said softly, "but it doesn't have to define us forever." She walked to where Ethan sat. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting what happened. It's about choosing to build something new from the broken pieces. Ethan nodded, shoulders slumping. "I'll step back from the campaign," he said, "and, if you'll let me, I'd like to volunteer at the center. Try to make this right." Raven stood next, his presence filling the room. "Sarah's case isn't closed," he said. "If you want truth, let's find it together. The right way this time." The tension in the room began to ease, like a long-held breath finally released. People started talking quietly among themselves, some crying, others nodding with understanding. It wasn't a clean victory or a perfect ending, but it was honest, messy and human and real. Pastor Helen moved through the crowd, organizing small prayer circles. June wiped her eyes and walked over to Ethan, offering him a tissue. The simple gesture seemed to break something loose in him, and he covered his face with his hands. Maya watched it all, feeling the weight of weeks of fear and anger beginning to lift. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight had brought something more valuable than victory. It had brought understanding. 1 month after Ethan's confession, the Willow Street Community Center hummed with renewed life. The morning sun streamed through freshly washed windows, catching dust motes that danced above the polished floors. The past 30 days had brought steady healing. Major donors not only returned, but increased their support. June attended weekly counseling sessions with Pastor Helen, slowly regaining her confidence. Marcus landed an apprenticeship at a local auto shop, while Raven's motorcycle co-op hired 2 young men from the center's job training program. The town council, true to their word, added security cameras and better lighting, but otherwise supported the center's mission. On this bright Saturday morning, folding tables lined the multi-purpose room for the center's biggest job fair yet. Maya watched from the doorway as Tia arranged coffee and donuts, her silver hair catching the light. "Remember when this room was just empty chairs?" Tia asked, adjusting a stack of paper cups. "Now look at it, full of possibility." June burst through the front door, waving an envelope. "It came!" she shouted, her voice trembling with excitement. "The scholarship letter, I got in!" Maya wrapped her in a tight hug as volunteers gathered around. The girl who had once been too scared to speak now glowed with pride, clutching her college acceptance letter. Outside, children worked on a new mural along the center's west wall. Their small hands guided brushes loaded with vibrant colors, painting scenes of community, helping hands, shared meals, books and tools and hearts. Rufus sat in his usual chair nearby, regaling the young artists with stories. "You think this is something?" he chuckled. "Should have seen us in '85 when the mill closed. Whole town looked ready to give up. But we didn't. Just like now, we held on and helped each other up." As dusk approached, Maya and Raven worked side by side in the center's kitchen, preparing for the evening's potluck. She chopped vegetables while he stirred a pot of his famous chili. "Remember our wedding day?" Maya asked softly, sliding carrots into the pot. Everyone said we were crazy, the respected community organizer and the reformed biker. Raven's laugh rumbled deep in his chest. They said it wouldn't last a year. And here we are, Maya smiled, touching the small cross at her neck. You know why we made it? Because you're stubborn as a mule? His eyes crinkled with affection. Because we chose each other every day, she said, through all the whispers and sideways looks. We kept choosing love over fear. The kitchen door creaked open, and Ethan entered hesitantly, carrying a stack of bowls. Over the past month, he'd shown up regularly to help serve meals, his designer suits replaced by simple khakis and rolled-up sleeves. The work had humbled him, taught him to listen more than speak. Where do you want these? He asked quietly. By the soup station, Maya directed. And Ethan? Thank you for coming. He nodded, a small smile touching his lips. As evening settled, the multi-purpose room filled with the warmth of community. Tables groaned under the weight of casseroles, pies, and dishes from a dozen different cultures. Former adversaries sat together, sharing bread and tentative conversation. Marv and his riders occupied one corner, their leather jackets draped over chair backs as they passed plates to young volunteers. June stood at the center of it all, showing her scholarship letter to anyone who would look. Pastor Helen beamed proudly beside her, while Tia wiped happy tears from her eyes. Laughter rippled through the room, not the forced kind, but genuine joy bubbling up from hearts that had remembered how to trust. Maya watched it all from her spot by the kitchen door, Raven's steady presence beside her, as their community shared not just food, but stories, hopes, and the simple gift of belonging. The warm light of paper lanterns cast a gentle glow over the scene, turning the old multi-purpose room into something sacred, a place where healing happened one meal, one conversation, one choice at a time. The morning after the potluck, sunlight streamed through the center's windows, casting long shadows across floors still bearing traces of last night's celebration. Maya stood on a stepladder, carefully pinning a new banner above the entrance. The bright letters proclaimed, "Everyone welcome," in warm, inviting colors. June arrived early, clutching her acceptance letter and a small gift bag. "Maya," she called out softly, "I wanted you to be the first to know. I accepted the scholarship." Maya climbed down from the ladder and embraced the young woman who had become like a daughter to her. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart." "I brought you something," June said, pulling out a framed drawing from the gift bag. It showed the center's facade, but with windows glowing like stained glass and people of all ages gathered on the steps. To remember that beauty can grow from hard times. 6 months later, the center hummed with renewed energy. A newly constructed wing, funded by a community development grant, housed classrooms and a computer lab. In the workshop area, Raven's motorcycle maintenance program had evolved into an official partnership with the city's job placement office. The sound of tools and friendly chatter drifted from the garage bay, where Marcus, now a full-time apprentice earning decent wages, taught basic engine repair to a new group of students. Ethan, serving on the restitution committee he'd helped establish, sat at a folding table reviewing applications for the center's summer internship program. His suits were gone, replaced by casual business wear, and though he still struggled sometimes with old habits, his commitment to service remained steady. He looked up as Maya passed, offering a quiet nod of acknowledgement. 3 years later, the municipal building's ceremony room overflowed with familiar faces. Mayor Thompson stood at the podium, holding up a civic service medal that caught the afternoon light. For their unwavering dedication to building bridges and fostering understanding in our community, she announced, we honor Maya Brooks and Silas Raven King with the town's highest civilian recognition. The crowd erupted in applause as Maya and Raven accepted the award. In the front row, June, now a poised college junior, waited her turn to speak. When she took the podium, her voice carried clear and strong. 3 years ago, this community faced a choice between fear and hope, she began. Through the courage of people like Maya and Raven, we chose hope. Today, I stand before you not as that black girl someone once tried to diminish, but as a proud student and member of this community who learned that love is stronger than hatred. As the sun began to set that evening, Maya stood in the center's doorway, watching children play basketball on the newly paved court. Their laughter echoed across the yard, where flower gardens now bloomed in places that had once been bare dirt. She twisted her wedding ring, remembering all the small moments of courage that had brought them here. Courage chosen in quiet kitchens, in tense council rooms, in moments of necessary forgiveness. A town had learned to be kinder, not through grand gestures, but through daily acts of grace. And the girl they had tried to label and dismiss? She had become the reason they remembered to look beyond their fears and see the humanity in each other's eyes. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.